The Mannings are the closest thing we got to a football royal family. The whole Manning monarch, if you will, started with a small-time king whose sons took what their dad gave them and grew it exponentially. And they've managed to remain prominent years after their initial reigns. And it's dope because the oldest and oftentimes forgotten son, Cooper Manning, is the one who is continuing the legacy by having his son, who you've heard of, a kid named Arch Manning, start his rise to power down in the South. But while the Mannings came up in the spotlight, the Nacua family had to get it out the mud. According to the NCAA, only 6% of high school football players will play the sport in college. That's 3 out of 50, not the best odds. Well, the Nacua family has raised 5 boys, and every one of them has played D1 ball. 3 have already played the sport at the highest level, and 1 is rewriting NFL record books. There was a time when Samoan players were only looked at to be potential offensive and defensive linemen. Today we got passing leaders, Heisman Trophy winners, and record-breaking rookie wide receivers galore. Today Samoan players are 56% more likely than any other ethnic group to make it to the NFL, and those numbers are crazy. And there's some thoughts on why that's become the case. For one, their ancestral values align with the game. Things like physical, mental, and spiritual toughness. These are all things that prove to be valuable when you step on a football field and you strap on them pads. And when those very core values match up with the core values that you've been taught since you was a kid, the game kind of resonates on a deeper level, allowing you to give yourself to the game more freely. Also, other Samoan values like having a deep respect for your elders and holding community above the individual means that most of these dudes are super coachable, and they just naturally come with that team first mentality. But when you take that and mix it with the competitive environment created when you have a family with 5 boys, you get a story so good that it reads like fiction. And today I'm excited to tell you the whole thing. When Miss Penina Nacua was just a little girl, her and her mom moved from West Samoa to the US. Years later, when she grew up, she met Lionel Nacua, got married, took his name, and started a new football family. It really did seem like they was trying to start a football team. And if we talking one side of the ball, they got like halfway there. 5 boys and a girl, every one of them unique, and every single one with a different role to play. The oldest, the thinker, the joker, and the crybaby. Those are the 4 we're gonna focus on today. Both Nacua parents had strong belief in sports. Here's a direct quote from Miss Penina Nacua. When the kids were small, my husband and I always believed that sports were vital for them. So everyone was sort of expected to be active and participate in sports. So that's what it was. 3 of the kids took that all the way to the NFL. Kai, Puka, and we'll also count Samson. Isaiah Nacua is the second oldest brother, and he didn't make the league, but he played D1, and later we'll discuss why he probably could have, but chose not to. There were many wars fought in the Nacua backyard. 3-on-3 battles for family supremacy, brutal wrestling matches, getting dumped on your back, getting swacked and mad until the tears flow freely, learning how to deal with it when you get dunked on, when you get clowned and the opponent's talking trash. Well, most of the brothers learn to deal with this, but when you're the oldest, you don't do a lot of losing. But the rest of the brothers took their share of L's. Here's a quote from the second brother, Isaiah Nacua. It was everything from board games to eating. You couldn't get on your food because somebody else was punking you. But it's not just about competition. It's about the love in the competition. You can't compete every day because that'll take a strain on you. You gotta have that love and drive and passion for the game. That love was cultivated by Lionel Nacua, father, husband, and football coach. Lionel coached the boys from early on through high school, and he embedded that love of the game into his sons. Kai was the firstborn, the first to do everything. When he went to play in the backyard, all his brothers followed him. When he went to BYU, his brothers followed him. He made it to the league, some of his brothers followed him. Obviously, Kai being the oldest played a part in this, but a tragedy would magnify this even more. One major day for everyone in the Nacua family was May 14th, 2012. On that day, the head of the family, the man who taught his sons to love this beautiful game, would sadly pass away at 45. His oldest son, Kai, on that day became the man of the house. He was just 17 years old, a senior in high school. Well, the NFL's back, so that's what's up. And I team back up with DraftKings to kick off the season. And even if the NFL kickoff might look a little different, you can still kick it off like you did last year with DraftKings. You're gonna like where this is going. Let me break it down real quick. New customers bet $5 on any DraftKings wager and get $250 in bonus bets instantly. And a month of NFL Plus premium. All that for betting $5, bro. Imagine if you win. But if sports betting is not yet available in your state, you still have a shot at winning cash prizes with DraftKings Daily Fantasy. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use my promo code FlemLo, then bet $5 on any wager and get $250 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FlemLo, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. One major day for everyone in the Nacua family was May 14th, 2012. On that day, the head of the family, the man who taught his sons to love this beautiful game, would sadly pass away at 45. His oldest son, Kai, on that day became the man of the house. He was just 17 years old, a senior in high school. Now he had to take everything that his father had taught him and try his best to emulate it until the day came when he could truly feel and embody those lessons. But until then, he just did the best that he could. But one way he knew to honor his dad in that space and time was where else, bro? On the football field. His senior season started just a few months after the man who placed the ball in his hands passed away. That year, Kai, the high school quarterback, led his team to an 11-2 record. He gained 2,000 yards and scored 19 touchdowns. He was a good athlete with a mind for the game. But the quarterback position wouldn't be his future, and he figured that out quick during his recruitment. He committed to BYU, where he converted to linebacker and then was promptly and correctly moved to safety. This is the position he still plays over a decade later, when he's played at the highest level of football. When he went to BYU, Ms. Panina decided to move the whole family down to stay closer to their brother. So they moved to Utah, where BYU is located, and the move actually helped distract them from the pain of losing their dad. Kai barely touched the field during his freshman season, but in year 2, he would make his presence felt. He racked up 40 tackles, 3.5 TFLs, 2 interceptions, and 3 pass breakups. Unfortunately though, his most notable moment was not the type of thing you want to be remembered for. It was a few days before Christmas in 2014 when BYU played Memphis in the Miami Bowl. The game was a classic shootout that went to overtime, but ultimately Memphis came away with the win. Then a brawl breaks out, and it gets out of control quick. And when the camera zoomed in, guess who they caught? Our boy Puka Nacua, red-handed and red-faced. This is not the look you want on your first close-up. It's kind of hard to put these together in order since these clips come from different sources, but here's what it looks like to me. Based on the articles around this and the footage that we have, plus Kai's reaction to this thing the next day, I think I've got the general order of things. So we don't know where Kai is when the brawl breaks out. By the time we find him, he's throwing what looks like a cheap punch. Then in super slow motion, this guy spots him, loads up, and tees off as Kai is being held back. But based on what we're seeing, he throws a cheap shot first, so this is just the payback, you know what I'm saying, retaliation. And Buddy landed a clean one that seems to have gashed open Kai's left eye. That's how it goes sometimes. After this, he takes a moment. He's not sure how to react. He knows he's on TV and that he took things too far. And now he's bleeding from his eye. And despite trying to stay calm, on the inside, he's slowly hulking out. I'm sure Kai had his battles with his brothers growing up, but as the oldest, you gotta think, he was winning most of the battles. So first taking this loss, then getting punched in the face, he reacted like somebody who's not used to that happening. Some media outlets was pushing for the man to be expelled, while he was on the other side of it, trapped in a cascade of embarrassment. It was the worst feeling ever. Immediately, I was accepting of the punishment. Honestly, I was just humbled. It happened. Everybody saw what happened. There's no trying to fight it because it was all over TV. I just had to learn from it and try to show the other guys that there's a certain way that you should react to something. It was just disappointing for me to see myself on TV representing the university and my family the wrong way. I would say the day after was the hardest part of it. I was just apologizing to everybody I could. Now, because this happened in the bowl game, aka the last game of the season, Kai wouldn't be suspended until the next year. He just had to to wear that L for the whole offseason. Maybe since he already had to take a punch to the face, BYU decided just to give him a slap on the wrist. He was suspended for 1 game, which he watched from home. He just stood there in front of the TV the whole damn game. Though his suspension was short, the punishment felt worse, cause all offseason he had to just sit there and think about how he embarrassed his family on national TV, how his dad would feel about it. You think about all of that. The oldest of 6 boys, and now the man in his family. This wasn't the example he'd intended to set. He couldn't go back now, he could only move forward and be prepared for the next time he stepped onto the field. When Kai Nacua got back on the field versus Boise, he made sure the Nacua name was remembered for more than just a brawl. Versus Boise State, the junior safety caught 3 interceptions, including a 50-yard pick 6 to seal off the dub. Now Kai Nacua, the misfit who sucker punched the dude, was Kai Nacua, National Player of the Week. Kai ended up catching 6 interceptions as a junior, and he caught 6 more as a senior the next year. He also recorded over 100 tackles in those 2 years combined as well. He didn't make the Senior Bowl, but made the Senior Bowl watch list, and he had a small chance to be taken in the draft. But ultimately and unfortunately, he never get the chance to hear his name called. Despite that, Kai played 6 years in the NFL, although during that time he played for 6 different teams. He bounced around practice squads for about half of that time, but in other years made the roster and played a lot of special teams. In 2023, he decided to change course. He signed with the UFL Spring League, hoping for a chance to actually play and make an impact. And when he stepped out onto the field, that's exactly what he did. He made 43 tackles, recorded a sack, and caught 3 picks in a 10-game season. Those 3 interceptions were actually tied for most in the league. Now he's a league leader. The oldest brother wasn't perfect, but he was first over the hill. He paved the way for his younger brothers and experienced everything first. He could pass on that knowledge to them either verbally or just from them watching him as he went through it. Isaiah Nacua was a 3-star prospect. The DN was the number 3 player in all of Nevada. At one time, other than Puka, Isaiah was the highest ranked prospect of all of his brothers. Isaiah had the opportunity to spread his wings and accept scholarships to Arizona State or Utah, but ultimately made not the best choice for him, but the best choice for his family. He went to BYU. Same school as his brother. But only 1 year later, Isaiah withdrew, not just from the team, from BYU altogether. He enrolled in Snow College, which is touted as one of the top educational schools in the country. Earlier, I read a certain quote from Isaiah, and when I read it again here, it'll probably hit your ears a little different. He said, quote, "It's not just about competition, but it's the love in the competition. You can't compete every day. That'll take a strain on you. You've got to have love and that drive and that passion for the game." Now, reading that quote while knowing that Isaiah actually walked away from the game early, it seems like he's probably the conscientious brother, and instead of just accepting, this is what we do, I'll force that fire even if I don't feel it, he decided that for him, that flame had gone out. And true to his words, without that love, the game put a strain on him. It's very likely that the loss of his father kind of broke that connection between Isaiah and football. And you'll actually see it early in his high school career. The dude had a 90 overall prospect grade. Then after the tragic passing of his dad, you saw his prospect grade slip down his senior year. This is obviously just a theory, but it's very likely that that's when he lost passion for the game. And I'm the type of cat, bro, I really respect that, because when you come from a family where everybody plays ball and you can play, right? It's not like you was trash, but you just decide that the sport ain't for you. That's hard to do. And I'm sure his brothers gave him slack, whether passive aggressively or just aggressively. But of course, over time, as they all get older, I'm sure everybody can understand his decision even more. Now, it's also possible that maybe Isaiah never had that passion for the game in the first place. He could have just played because it's the game his dad loved, and after his dad was gone, there was no need to play anymore. But either way, the second son of this great football family walked away from the game, but the next 2 ran towards it. All the Nacua brothers went through their share of wars, not just in the backyard, bro, we talking live bullets. But nobody went at it like Puka and Samson, and sadly for Puka, Samson won most of these battles. Samson comes across in the articles I've read as the free-spirited wild card of the Nacua family. This even comes up when Kai tries to sell us on Samson. Check out this clip of him just trying to give his brother props.
Ooh, most underrated guy on my team? I'd have to say my brother Samson. He's a wide receiver right now. Kid is just a baller. He just knows how to play the game. I don't know, people may see he may not be, you know, a little too serious or goofy, but that's just his personality. And when he's on the field, he does what he does.
Samson Nacua still remembers watching this game when his two older brothers faced off for the state title. He was cheering for Kai and, quote, cheering his ass off as other members of the family cheered for Isaiah. See, they were basically split up in teams of cheering squads, half cheering for Kai, half cheering for Isaiah. And the only detail I needed that the article ain't give me, which side was Puka cheering for? Like, I need to know this. Samson was born into the war of the brothers. Kai and Isaiah already had it going by the time he showed up. I'm sure he got pushed around a lot until Puka came along, and now he had a younger brother he can dunk on in the driveway. According to Miss Penina Nacua, Puka is the family crybaby. Puka's mom telling embarrassing stories about him as a kid is hilarious, but she says verbatim, Puka was the kid that was always crying, and Samson was the kid always pushing his buttons and making him mad and just being a damn troll. Samson beat him at everything: basketball, backyard football, video games, board games, foot races, arm wrestling. But the thing is, Samson had a massive advantage because he is 3.5 years older than Puka, until I'd say around 23 years old. That age makes a massive difference, but the younger you are, the wider that gap feels. There was a study I read about in this book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, and it applies to this perfectly. But before we get into that, man, first let me give you more of the story, then I'll summarize the study. That way you make the connection and the punchline hits. So one day in high school, Samson and Puka found themselves in a similar situation to their older brothers. They were about to face off in a real game, and I tell you, bro, it wasn't looking good for Puka. So all the Nacua brothers at one point or another actually attended different high schools. I got theories as to why, but it's really not important. You just need to know they went to different schools for the story to make sense. But when Samson was a senior at Tempview High School, Puka was a freshman at Orem High. Early in the season, the two schools faced off. A good old-fashioned Nacua showdown. The true freshman Puka had an okay game. I mean, there was proof that he actually played. 3 receptions, 26 yards, something light, but he a freshman. It's just good to see he was involved. But dog, Samson played quarterback, receiver, and running back for his team and led them to a victory, 35-20. Dude rushed for just under 100 yards, 94, just short. Come on, Samson, bro, finish. Samson threw for 2 touchdowns in that game as well. Then after the second touchdown that basically sealed the game, this man ran to midfield to taunt his brother. Bro, he pulled his helmet off and started screaming for Puka to come do something to stop him from going off in the game. He said in the middle of the field, bro, screaming at his brother until the ref finally escorted this man out the game. Puka had to hold the L and the fact that he got called out. What did he do about it? At the time, he just cried. After the game, Samson finally threw his arm around his brother, telling him how proud he was of the game that Puka played. He showed the man tough love, but that's just how their family is. Miss Penina said these two are actually the closest, despite the fact that they used to fight all the time. It's also interesting that they both end up playing the same position. Samson Nacua was a 3-star prospect. He could have made a push for 4-star if not for his attitude. Like I said before, he's kind of an offbeat, free spirit type, which is fine, but it doesn't always mix well with football. The free spirit didn't initially follow his big brother's footsteps. Instead of BYU, he walked on at Utah. Yes, he walked on, but earned a scholarship after he was there. After one offseason, he was a scholarship player. But the quote-unquote slacker never made much of an impact, despite playing a lot during his first 3 seasons. In 3 years, he amassed just under 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns for the Utah Utes. Now, Samson wore number 45. Multiple times in his football career. Not your typical wide receiver number, and I couldn't find confirmation, but my assumption, maybe this was a tribute to his dad. Mr. Lionel Nacua passed away at the age of 45. Could be a coincidence, or maybe this is why one of his sons decided to keep this number close to his chest. To take it a step further, maybe for Samson, this is a reminder to enjoy every moment, because life is long, but it's also short. and you never know when your number's gonna be called. His little brother Puka also strayed away from BYU, but stayed on the West Coast as well. He went to Washington as a freshman and a sophomore, but wasn't getting the opportunities that he felt he deserved. So in 2021, both of the brothers decided that maybe they'd made a mistake. So they backtracked and followed older brother Kai's blueprint by transferring to BYU to play together. These two was always going against each other, and Samson was always winning those battles. But things had changed in more ways than one, and Samson was gonna have to adjust to that quick. There wasn't rivals no more. They was on the same team now. Oh, and little brother Puka was now the big dog. Samson had a similar year to the ones he had at Utah, 300-something yards and a handful of scores. Nothing wrong with that. Solid production. But meanwhile, little bro was going to off. 43 catches, 800 yards and 6 touchdowns in his first year on campus. The redshirt senior was greatly outplayed by the redshirt sophomore that he'd always bested. And once he got past the competitive wall, I'm sure as a big brother, he couldn't have been prouder. When Puka was 7th grade, he was running behind a 5th grade Samson, always playing with his older brother and his older friends. Puka was always losing, but always learning, always growing and always developing. This actually reminds me of my little brother. We're 3 years apart and he developed the same way. A lot of times I was playing up when we was on the college campus, but he was playing with me, so he was playing way up. For Puka and Samson, it was the same thing. And it was hard for Puka at first, but soon things would get easy. At first, it was hard for him to see his progress because he's measuring it against somebody who not only has the psychological edge, but who's also developing. So he's slowly closing the gap, but it doesn't feel like it. Now, this brings us back to the study that I mentioned. For years, studies have been done on athletes and their birthdays, which to an old school sports fan might sound like some hocus pocus. But the gist of it is kids who have late birthdays, you know, the ones born after the school cutoff date, they are more likely to stand out academically and physically in the early stages. That extra 6 to 11 months of development is huge. So early on, bro, the late birthday kids in extreme cases are basically playing a grade down. For example, in California, and I think most states, California is just the one that popped up when I looked this up to confirm, but if a kid is not 6 years old by September 1st, he can't start school until the next year. So a kid born on September 2nd, 2024 would start the first grade at the same time as a kid born on August 30th, 2025, but the other kid's a year older. Like I said earlier, the younger you are, the more exaggerated that age gap feels. If you got kids and think about how they acted at 4 versus how they act at 5, my kid became a completely different person. Now, obviously, I'm using the most extreme version of this example so that you can get the point. But there's a well-documented Canadian study that clearly shows kids born right after the cutoff date tend to make better grades and do better in sports early on compared to those born closer to the deadline. The way this plays itself out long term is that the late birthday kids who win early on and dominate early on usually walk out that situation with much higher confidence, and most people then will accept these artificial roles. But on the flip side, if the early birthday kid can compete and not get beat into submission, they oftentimes catch up later in the development cycle. They develop into better strategists and have better technique. They're basically forced to develop more skill because that's the only way they can compete early on. Meanwhile, late birthday kids, and these are generalizations, but they typically rely on their physical dominance. But once the physical playing field gets narrowed, one day they look up and can't touch the younger kid. Samson and Puka fit this build to a T, although their age difference is far more pronounced. But if a 6 to 11 month gap is that damn crucial, imagine how crucial a 3.5 year gap must be. So Puka had to build even more skill, even more technique in order to catch up. And it took him till his brother was a 5th year senior in college to finally surpass Big Bro. So the focus issues that Samson could have, Puka never had. Cause when they was kids, he had to lock in just to still lose. Meanwhile, Samson's having a time of his life. And it's nobody's fault. This is just like the nature of things. Now, Puka was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. He was the #1 recruit coming out of Utah. He had by by far the highest recruit grade of any of his brothers and had the makings of a star. He was the first in his family to actually be drafted, a 5th round pick. Better late than never, right? In his first NFL season, this dude nearly outproduced his entire 4 years of production in college. And he did outproduce every rookie wide receiver to ever play in the NFL. He broke the rookie receiving records for receptions and yards. And I gotta be real, he looked like a beast doing it. Lionel Nacua passed his oldest son the baton, and each brother ran their leg of the race best they could. Every single bit of their individual effort was needed to get the family name to where it is today. Now, Puka Nacua, formerly known as the Crybaby, is one of the best wide receivers in the whole NFL. Kai is still playing in the UFL as the interception leader gears up for yet another season. Samson just had like one of the best moments of the NFL preseason. Just score it next time. And honestly, I blame this dude right here. If he blocks instead of celebrating, then my dude would have scored. Isaiah's busy living life on his own terms, and I'm happy for him, man. I really hope he finds what he's looking for. And after all of them, the race still isn't over. There's one more Nacua brother who awaits the baton.